Hey guys, welcome to Unit 15. This unit is about changing the world, so a little bit of optimism at the end of our course. I've got our usual machine up here, so we've got you or me or anybody else, the machine that influences the thoughts and behaviors that we have, and it's comprised of the symbolic universe, collective consciousness, interaction order, and social institutions. Just as a quick reminder, I'm sure you remember this, but this side is culture. This side is social structure. This side mainly deals with thoughts. This side mainly influences behaviors. All right, so what we're going to do in this lecture is just really talk about or answer two questions. What we mean when we talk about changing the world, and second of all, how to do it, which just sounds kind of stupidly ambitious. It's actually going to be a four video sequence that will hopefully make some sense about what I specifically mean about changing the world. All right, to begin with, let's answer the first question. When we say change the world, what do we mean? In sociology, we're going to make it a little bit less grand sounding than it is, though I do want to stress to you that the way we talk about changing the world really does mean making the world a better place for everybody. So while it's going to sound a little bit less grand, I do want to make sure that I'm clear about the fact that what we're talking about here is significant changes that improve the lives of people. Okay, what changing the world means for us? It means changing this machine. Remember, this machine that we build to help meet our needs for surviving is the world. It's the social world that we live in. It's the world that produces all of the positive and negative outcomes. Remember, we've got a whole bunch of individuals who are turned into a patterns of thoughts and behaviors. You change this machine, you change the patterns at the other side. And when I say change the machine, I mean very specifically the four components that we've talked about. Changing meanings to symbols that exist there. When I was growing up, to be LGBT, to have that symbol, to be gay, was to be considered outside of the realm of normal society. Almost everybody in the 1970s and 1980s, almost everybody who was gay or transgender was in the closet. We have changed the meaning of LGBT, and just changing that meaning, saying that it is socially acceptable to love whoever you love or to identify the way you identify. Just changing that symbol changed the world for a whole bunch of people in very specific material ways. Changing the beliefs in the collective consciousness. Helping us to understand, have it come to a different understanding about what we're supposed to be doing in the world, makes the world a better place. We talked about this earlier in the semester. It used to be a dominant belief here that white people were better than everybody else. And based on that belief, we had decades and centuries of torture, of discrimination. We're still dealing with that today, but the world is a different place now than it was in the 1830s or even in the 1930s. So changing that belief from white supremacy being dominant to a belief in racial equality being dominant. And I don't want to make it sound like everything's fixed. I'm not trying to say that. I'm trying to say it's improved. The world is a different place, and it's a different place because of, in this case, one specific belief losing its dominant status while an emergent one became more dominant, the belief in racial equality. Changes in the statuses that exist in the social structure, not just in the interaction order, but in the social structure in general. The fact that you can go to school now to become a video game designer, that status did not exist in our society in the 1970s. And now, to be honest with you, it sounds like it would be a pretty cool job. Or norms that existed with specific statuses. One that comes to mind is the fact that police officers now in a lot of communities, and this is a negative thing in a more general way because of the opioid epidemic, but police officers who have now the norm of carrying around Narcan to be able to immediately deal with opioid overdoses, that change in a norm from I'm there to enforce the law to I am a first responder who will deal with these things changes the lives of individuals and families. So all of this, to answer the question of what are we talking about when we're talking about changing the world, what we're talking about is a specific change to a symbol, to a belief, to a status, or a norm. Any of those changes the world in very serious ways for a lot of people. Okay, so that is point one, what we are doing. Point two, how to do it. And this is where it's going to be a little bit longer than like a 3-second explanation, but it's important to get this out just at the very beginning. In order to change the world, you have to act deviantly. And if you think about that for just one moment, of course you would, right? If you don't act deviantly, if I am this person being inserted into this machine and thinking the pattern of thoughts that the society is influencing me to have, behaving in ways that society is influencing me to behave, this whole thing just becomes a great big circuit. I go in, I get taught a certain pattern of thoughts and behaviors, those patterns produce certain outcomes, and then I get recycled back in. Nothing changes as long as you are conforming. Now, before you go off and go crazy, I do want to suggest that just rampant deviance isn't the solution. All that does is annoys people. But deviance in a calculated way changes the world. We talked in the last unit about different types of deviance. There are two types that I mentioned last time in the last unit that contribute to or can potentially contribute to social change. And those are innovation, which is accepting the socially approved goals of society, but rejecting the socially approved means for achieving them. And I think I used Mark Zuckerberg or some sort of some computer scientist or coder or social media entrepreneur to talk about how they accepted socially approved goals, but they rejected the means, the jobs that were out there already, and said, I'm going to do my own thing. But while there are certainly problems with social media, you can't deny the fact that it has changed the world. And then rebellion, and I don't remember who the example I used was, but Karl Marx comes to mind. It may have been Karl Marx that I used before. Karl Marx rejected the socially approved goals of society. He said getting rich is causing people to be alienated and exploited. Let's get rid of that. He rejected the socially approved means for achieving those goals as well. He said we don't need to have owners and managers and workers. What we need to have is everybody sort of collectively owning things. Now, this isn't an advertisement for capitalism, or I'm sorry, this isn't an advertisement for communism. But you can't deny the fact that the most populous country in the world, China, is basically China. It's a communist country because of the writing that Karl Marx did in the 1800s. Whether you like him or not, and I say that there's some good and some bad, he changes the world by being a rebel. Importantly, to change the world doesn't mean you have to do it in some grand way. You don't have to be Karl Marx or Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs or Martin Luther King Jr. changes the world. You don't have to do that. It doesn't have to be something huge. If you've got that in you, by all means go for it, because our world is a little bit of a mess right now. But a lot of us don't have that. We don't have something grand in us. I'm going to make the argument in the next video that you don't have to. You can be this humble little stick figure stepping into the social construction of reality, and you can change the world just in your own day-to-day life. So I'll stop this video, and in the second video, we'll talk specifically about how to do that. I'll see you then.